I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping more people succeed in tech sales and get the most out of life. We've got a great guest today, Ian Mindham, who was a former MMA fighter, pretty badass, broke into tech sales, got promoted from SDR to AE within 6 months, and then moved on to SMB account executive, enterprise account executive, and even managing enterprise teams at Upwork. We're going to learn a lot from him today about the mindset and the tactics to get promoted quickly and accelerate your tech sales career. If you get value out of the video, of course, make sure to give the like button a love tap because the YouTube algorithm loves that too. And we'll show this video to more people who could benefit from the message. And of course, subscribe to the channel for weekly videos. I've got your back with uplifting content to help you succeed in tech sales and in life. All right, so let's dive into it. Ian, how's your day going so far?
It's going great. Thanks so much for the flattering introduction, Chris.
Yeah, man, you're an absolute stud. And I'm excited to learn more from you. When we met at that one pool party in Austin, I was pretty blown away at your path to getting promoted from SDR to AE within 6 months. It actually took me a year. So we're going to talk about that. But first, wanted to get some feel-good vibes going. What is it that you love most about tech sales as a career path?
That's a good question. I think just sales in general. It's as you mentioned, I come from an athletic background, grew up playing multiple sports, ice hockey, lacrosse when I was a kid, and then later honed in on wrestled in college for a little bit. And then that eventually got me to switch over to MMA. What I love about sales in general is it's truly the greatest sport. If you look at my body now, I'm 30 years old, so pretty young, should be in my athletic peak. It doesn't always feel like it. Yeah. My wife's always telling me now when I get up and off the couch, I make these grunting noises, probably because there's always something wrong with me. But if you look at the human body, the last muscle in your body to get true atrophy is your brain. So you can compete in sales for far longer than you can any other sport. And as long as you can recalibrate that competitiveness in a healthy way, it's extremely fun. So that's the short answer of why I love it.
That's pretty amazing. You're a competitive spirit. And so it seems like for anyone who has a competitive nature, tech sales is a great place to be. And like you said, the body can atrophy over time. I'm 30 as well, right there with you. And I noticed a few more aches and pains, but the mind is the last thing to go. It's a really powerful muscle and you can continue to flex that for a long, long time in tech sales. You don't have to retire early. And of course, as we know, you can make a lot of money and build a lot of meaningful connections along the way. I love that answer because I asked this question to a lot of folks and I think yours was a little bit different. It's definitely refreshing. So I wanted to talk about your journey into tech sales. We'll probably dig a little bit into your MMA experience because that's just really cool, some of the things that taught you about success. But let's talk first about what was the company that you started out working at? And were there any things in particular that helped you get that first SDR role?
Yeah. That's a good place to start. I think a lot of my athletic background ties into, everything I do as it relates to consistency, discipline, pushing through things that aren't necessarily fun, but, are a means to an end. My first job right out of college, I did an internship for them when I was in college. It was for a WPP marketing agency. They worked with big consumer packaged goods brands like Unilever, GlaxoSmithKline, Procter & Gamble, to help improve their online and retail presence. So the first 2 years out of school, I worked for them in Manhattan. And then I ended up transferring down to the headquarters in South Africa, where I initially found out about them and spent almost another 2 years there. So that was my first job. And it was good. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what not to do. And I most importantly, I was able to narrow down, what I wanted in a career and what I wanted in a job. And I ultimately found out that wasn't in the ad or marketing space. I was drawn to sales because there's tech sales, because there's a direct correlation between, inputs and outputs. And there are a lot of quantifiable data points that you can, map the sale back towards most of the time, at least.
Yes.
And I didn't always feel that when I was selling more opinionated ideas in a marketing setting. I was living in South Africa. I was about 25 25 at the time. With my now wife, I was extremely broke. I was making South African rands, about like $35,000 a year, which down there you can live like a king, but your ability to save up money if you want to come back to the US, visit family, go on any sort of vacation, you can pretty much forget about it. So as I looked at like my longer term prospects as I got a little older, said, what can I do that will allow me to do what I love the most, be competitive, play the sport, but also, allow me to live the life that I want, to give me a little more financial freedom and reach those longer term goals that my wife and I had at the time.
Yes.
And that ultimately meant making the tough decision of moving back to the US. South Africa is a great country. Sure, it has a series of problems, but just didn't see the opportunity for myself there. And that I ultimately decided to go to, the place where everyone thinks they should start their tech career, or at least most people, and that was San Francisco. And I got there with no job, basically no cash, living on my cousin's couch. Family giving me like a few $100s a month, which if you've ever been to San Francisco knows that will get you absolutely nowhere. And it was a grind. It took a while to get my first SDR role, and there's actually a pretty funny story behind it that I think ties into other characteristics that have translated into success in sales.
Yes.
But I was never supposed to get that job.
So tell us more about that. Why not?
So it was kind of funny. Like I didn't know what to say in my interviews. And in retrospect, I was just running my mouth far too much. I was just talking the whole time, not asking, thoughtful questions, not really speaking to, what they're looking for. And there's no secret. It's, can you consistently do this for X period of time, standards, 12 to 18 months, and just churn out this, monotonous work and put meetings and opportunities on the board. And I was just going in there and telling more of like, my story and just like hoping, it would resonate. And some people it did, most people it didn't. I even got some feedback from one guy who said like he could have put himself on mute for 20 minutes, like turn the phone on at the end, and I would have like still been talking, which he was correct. I just didn't know how to interview for that kind of sales role because I never interviewed for a job. I got my first job right out of college, based off of an internship. But to kind of hone it back, like to what I was originally saying, I started working at Checker. It's a background checking API solution, simply put. Now they've branched off into a number of other things like payments, data. But at the time they were about a 70, 80 person company, not the $5-6 billion one they are now. I applied, and like many other companies I applied to, I didn't hear anything. I didn't even get an interview. And then one day the recruiter called me up and said, "Hey, Ian, person X really enjoyed their initial conversation with you. We would love to bring you on site for step number 2. Now, I initially automatically knew that the recruiter had mixed me up with someone else because I never had that initial screening call. My name must have been in the ATS, like right next to someone else's. And I just responded and said, you know what? I really enjoyed the conversation myself. Like, that sounds like a phenomenal next step. When can I come in? We set up a date. I showed up to the office. The hiring manager who ended up hiring me is a mentor and friend. Quickly figured out I wasn't that person. And in short, I kind of just said, I'm not that person. They made a mistake, but I know you blocked off 30 minutes of your time. I'm here. Let's just have this conversation. And I basically walked out with the job.
Wow. What did you do well that time around? And were you more to the point? Because that was one of my takeaways, by the way, is you're like, oh, you were chattering away, which I do, be more to the point. But like, what did you do well in this interview to get that job?
I think I walked in and I was really in awe of their office and the space. And, this was pre-COVID, so people weren't in there. And not to say like you can definitely do this in a remote world, but I was in awe of like what they had built, even though it was still relative, stages of infancy at the time. Yeah. So I was just asking those genuine questions of, how they got there, what their longer term goals are, kind of like where I fit into the equation. And then like realizing that, hey, I've been working like as an account executive and a client services manager for a really big like multinational company for years. Like I'm going to have to take half a step back in order to take two forwards. Like what can I do to crush this job and not do it full time ever again, even though every AE or every good AE is outbounding and prospecting every single day.
So what were the top couple things that you did to get promoted very quickly? Because we had a conversation and you hit on a few things that just really resonated. So I'd love to know the top handful of things that you did to make the biggest difference to get promoted.
Yeah, for sure. There's like I've been asked this a few times. I've mentored a few like SDRs who've moved up to AE. Friends of mine, other people have just reached out, and there's really like for that job, there's no secret. There's no hidden sauce. The biggest piece is effort, which is actually great. Like it's the one controllable in that spot. The economy could be, pretty weak, struggling, like heading into a recession, whatever it may look like, but very similar to athletics. Like you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I absolutely never was. Still am not. You don't have to be the most athletic. You don't have to have the slickest moves, but you can change that whole landscape by the amount of hours, like the inputs. How many hours do you put in? If the average person is putting in, 8 hours, like a 9 to 5, and you do 10 to 12 every day, and then you work, Saturday for 5-6 hours, you close that gap extremely quickly. So that's the biggest one. And as soon as you realize that, in many ways, it is a numbers game, and it's a means to an end. It becomes a lot more digestible versus saying, I'm going to do this for 8 hours a day for a year and a half or 2 years.
What motivated you to put in that level of effort? Because it's so simple, but it's hard, to will yourself to put in more work than the others. Like what actually motivated you and carried you to do it?
Yeah, I think everyone has different motivations. I had a lot of that already programmed into myself from fighting, from wrestling growing up. Again, like I'm not a freak athlete, certainly not the strongest, but I did pretty well. And I at an early age, or like at least in high school, I realized that I could totally change the playing field by just putting in those hours. My biggest motivation, if I'm being honest, was I was just moved off my cousin's couch. My wife was here. She's South African. She didn't have a visa to work, and the SDR salary was enough to like put food on the table and pay rent. But I was still extremely broke, and I didn't want to be broke anymore. And I saw people making money. So like a lot of other salespeople, it was financial motivation there.
I noticed that tech sales is a great vehicle for people who want to create more financial freedom, to put in an effort, to work hard and work smart and make more money. And then once they create that financial freedom and stability, they can think about the things like, oh, I want to be an actor. I want to do stand-up comedy. I want to start a YouTube channel. So that's the beauty of it. And it seems like partly that was your motivation. It was necessity. You wanted to break through. And clearly putting in the sweat equity and the number of hours and trusting the law of averages to get those results made a huge difference for you. What about call shadowing? How did that help you to get to the next level?
Yeah, so there's the work and effort piece, and then there's the skill and mentorship piece, like constantly upskilling yourself, because you could be the best, SDR, BDR out there, but if that's all you are, then people are going to say, you know what, it may be easier to fill our open AE role with an external hire who has like a couple of years or like 1 year track record versus promoting from within. And as like everything you can do to decrease that ramp time makes you that much more attractive. I saw everyone sitting around me, and this was like the standard, the norm, maybe with like an exception of like one or two people. But you know how it goes. You book the meeting, you have like a 5-10 minute call, then you have a discovery call, and the the way I've seen it work out 99% of the time is like SDR, make the introduction, maybe do a quick recap, and then shut up and let the AE do what they do best. And, that's probably how it should go 99% of the time. But there's absolutely no reason as to why that has to be your only, interaction with that company. Sure, we have like tools like Chorus, Gong. You can even record calls on Zoom, where you can upskill yourself by like doing, game tape reviews and all of that good stuff. It's just totally different when you're actually in the room, even if it's virtual, and you're learning firsthand. You're formulating questions yourself in real time because they haven't already been asked. And when you can, like what I did was I had 2 AEs that I was supporting. I was supporting 3 at the time, 2 I really got along with. And I just said, hey guys, like I'm not going to come in here and blow up your call, but I would love to stay on for the second discovery call, pretty much up until the demo and sometimes even on the demo. Just so, and I was just transparent. And the one AE who I didn't like, I was supporting 3 at the time, said absolutely no shot. And that was that. I didn't really have, anything to come back with. The other 2 said, okay. And, what I realized in retrospect is if a prospect genuinely has a problem with someone trying to make a career change or, upskill themselves, especially like when you're young, if you're in your early to mid 20s, like if they have a problem with someone being on a call and just being a fly on the wall and learning through osmosis, chances are they're not even, a real good prospect to begin with. So it's a good litmus test for the AE as well to better figure out like who am I dealing with and what will the subsequent conversations be like, based upon just their willingness to, operate with this company.
So what were some of the things that you learned in shadowing these calls that equipped you to really break through the next level and become a closer?
Yeah, I mean, there's just like the hardest part for me at the time was just becoming like genuinely comfortable. The other thing I noticed is the best AEs, and this is something like I spent a lot of time trying to perfect myself, and I still haven't done it 100%, was decent AEs, like ones who, almost hit quota, maybe just hit quota, but not those like 2-3xing, their expectations. Like they'll oftentimes, like they're by sales enablement or whoever it is, their sales leader, they're given a series of questions and they kind of like go through them and it's almost robotic and they have like a checklist they're going off. The ones who I saw built the greatest relationships are the ones who ask those questions. Sometimes maybe like 30% of the time they would ask a question that the company like told them to ask, but they would ask questions that they genuinely wanted to know the answer to. They would listen and they would ask the right follow-up questions. I'm not saying they would, go off topic or just, take the conversation like wherever the hell they wanted. But it was just, it was the way that they would take that consultative approach versus coming in and saying like, I have to do X, Y, and Z because that's what, the playbook says. The playbook oftentimes is, in my opinion, put in place to allow more people to hit quota, not to build exceptional salespeople across the board.
So the best closers were genuinely authentic in their discovery process, and they were conversational and not just asking canned questions, then following a playbook that they were told to follow without really second guessing it. That sounds like what you're saying is they had an authentic personal style, right? Cool.
Yeah, 100%.
How did you pull off shadowing these calls? Did that mean that you had to work at different hours because isn't that your baseline? You needed to hit a certain volume of outbound touches. How did you like balance that out, like adding in the extra call shadowing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's really how you deal with time management and structure your day. And, a lot of people spend multiple hours a day prospecting. Who am I going after? Why am I going after them?
Yeah.
What am I going to come to them with, or whatever that may look like? That's stuff you can do on your own time. You can do that in evenings. You can do that in weekends. And there's time throughout the day. There are prime calling hours. There are prime hours to send LinkedIn DMs, emails, like whatever you're trying to do. but all the grunt work, like you can just stay up late. You can wake up early in the morning. That's the great thing about the effort piece and all the controllables. So I just found a way to make it work. And anyone who says they don't have the time, probably needs to reevaluate and either find the time or maybe find a different line of work, unless they're happy, just being like a mid-tier salesperson, which is perfectly fine, by the way. That's totally fine. But it's just about making the time.
Yeah, I remember a sales manager of mine in my first inside sales role at Oracle. And shout out to Zach Wright for showing up today and sharing the love. He's the reason I met you, Ian, and have you on the channel. So give him credit. He's an ex-Oracle guy as well. And side note, shout out to Travis S. and the other folks who have shown up live. Thank you for your time and attention. But I remember my manager in my first inside sales role I told him, hey, I'm so busy. I don't have time for this and that. He's like, hey, Bussing, you got to reevaluate how are you spending your time. There's no excuse, right? Like, because I know that the top performer at Google Cloud, like one of my mentors when I was there, when I say top performer with it, there's many business units, as you know, in tech sales within these monster companies, but within his business segment, he worked about 20 hours a week. Like, he was unbelievably effective. He knew exactly the right person to call, and not just the right company, but the right persona and the right messaging, and had a network to draw from. So I love what you're saying, man. There's no excuse. You got to reevaluate how you're using your time if you're feeling like burnt out and stressed out. So, okay, you did your research on your own time, basically, so that you could execute calls. Was that the point, like in maybe the 9 to 5 prime time?
Exactly. And to your point, it's purely just because I'm not the smartest person. Like, there are people out there who could do what I do in half the amount of time. But as soon as like you recognize kind of like where you sit in terms of like natural intelligence, I'm not an idiot, obviously, but I'm not the smartest person. Like, then you start to better figure out, okay, like I have this amount of work to do. It's truly going to take this much time for me to do it. I can either, cut corners, which I've done in the past, doesn't really work out well, or I could just, find the time.
So what's key to cutting through the noise? Because I think prospecting is one of the hardest things there is in today's world. Well, in business, right? The SDR role is actually really hard. And I feel like you got to get more creative. But obviously, we have different channels, right? With the email, the phone, LinkedIn. I'd love to get your thoughts on what worked for you. And that could be the type of channel where you felt like you got the most meetings, how you went about writing compelling messaging. I would love to just get some high-level tops on your prospecting best practices.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at Upwork, like, we were coaching AEs on this, SDRs on this, and it was all about like personalization, and that's important. Anyone can tell you that. I had personalization. That's not really where I found the most success. Where I found the most success was in being extremely persistent. You have tools like Outreach. Apollo has outreach tools. They can set up sequences, tasks, reminders. It's easy to skip through those. It's easy to push them out a day. I actually just used an Excel spreadsheet that I filled in by hand as I was making calls and sending emails with whatever rejection, whatever feedback I got. And at the end of the night, I'd plug it into my sheet, which was, again, probably something that added hours to my work week. It's just my way of working. And just making sure that I was hitting the touch points that I knew I needed to hit. And I found the most success cold calling people. I would spend like 3 hours a day as an SDR, just like locked in one of these cubes in an office, doing nothing but cold calling. And when I got, hung up on or like rejected, that's when I thought the sale really started. So I would move them over into like a special category or a bucket where they got a little extra love and attention. And then I was making sure, like, throughout the whole time, is the relevant message, like, is the messaging relevant to their persona, their company, the industry space, like all that stuff that you should just know. That's important. But like the biggest thing is like what I said earlier. There's no secret. It's just trying to be as much of a workhorse as you can, and it will pay dividends. Just not getting burnt out and realizing that it's your job, and these people aren't, personally, telling you to go F yourself and all the nice things people say when they don't want to cold call them anymore. They have salespeople at their company too, and if most of the time, if they didn't, the lights wouldn't be on. So it's there for a reason. People get it.
Yeah, the 3 Ps: personalization, persistence, and picking up the phone. That's what I got from you, brother.
Exactly.
Des in Tech, thanks for showing up. She said, I like that, an extra attention bucket based off objection. Do you find that when you get, because you're a competitive person, when you get rejected, it actually motivates you even more to want to like make it work and make it happen? And is there a balance to like letting them simmer down and then going at them again? Or did you hit these people that rejected you right away?
Yeah, no, I mean, you have to realize everyone's human. So like, how would you appreciate people reaching out to you when you're, 5 years older, however long, until people started cold calling me about 2-3 years ago to sell software in the companies I was at.
Hey,
you
need it.
Yeah, don't be a pain in the ass, obviously. But it's also funny. Like at the time, like the most memorable meeting I ever booked was for a rep that I was supporting at the time. His name's Corey Ramos. He's strategic AE over there at Checker now, crushing it. And he hopped on the call, and like most calls, he said, "Why'd you take the call?" And the woman I had been calling, she said, "So Ian would stop calling me." And fortunately, like most of the time, that's not a qualified opportunity, and probably doesn't move from like 0 to stage 1 or however you're scoring that. But that deal, like I followed it, like as I did every deal, and that deal actually closed about like 8 months later. And that stuck with me for a while.
Yeah, dogged persistence can pay off. And especially if you're a company defining a new category where education's involved, it is just to get a meeting presents that opportunity to educate. Or even if you are in a mature market where they're with the competition, it is an opportunity if you have a good AE to introduce a perspective, a value hypothesis, and maybe change someone's way of thinking, which by the way is, that's an interview question I noticed a lot of folks get for SDR roles is, tell me about a time you changed someone's thinking, and I feel like sales is an art where we make things happen that weren't going to otherwise. But of course, coming from a place of authenticity and in solving a problem. Do you have any other sales moments that you're particularly proud of on top of, pushing for that meeting and having it turn to a deal?
Yeah, I do. Before I jump into that, I kind of want to say that like I saw a lot of success in I think it's called the every third rule. So every third time I would reach out, there wouldn't even be an ask there. I wouldn't just throw like irrelevant content their way, but I'd find something that I intentionally thought would be meaningful to them and share it with them, so that every single time it wasn't, Ian wants like X, Y, and Z out of me. It's just like, here, take it or leave it. I've been thinking about you, type of thing.
So the third touch point would bring some type of value. So it's not just transactional. It was something.
It's a nurture touch point. Yeah.
It's not just like thoughts ? Which could get a response, sometimes, but it was more than that. How many follow-ups did you typically find it would take to get a meeting? Was it more than 3?
Definitely. It was. Yeah. It depends. It was probably around 9 to 10 would be my guess. Again, supporting like enterprise sales teams trying to sell into like the Fortune 500, they're getting hit up by probably 50 Ian Mindhams from different companies. So. Yeah,
there's a consultancy called the Bridge Group. They're top inside sales and SDR consultancy, and they said, according to their study, it was 10 to 11. So clearly, you didn't even realize that you took a page out of their book. But what was the difference between prospecting into a large enterprise versus like a SMB type account? How do you have to change your approach up?
Yeah, so I transparently, like I know you said at the beginning of the call that I did SMB sales. I went straight to mid-market. So I've done like true SMB sales.
So mid-market, quick thing is the deals get a little more complex. So you skipped over that. Good distinction. Probably more decision makers. And so, that's a nice little jump. But then, not quite a enterprise, which you did end up getting. Okay, good distinction.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the question again?
The difference between even like mid-market prospecting and enterprise? Because I'm sure there's like a bit of a jump up in every aspect of the sale.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when it comes to prospecting, did it require more creativity and thoughtfulness? Would love to know.
I mean, I approached every account with the same amount of creativity and thoughtfulness. I tier it and prioritize it out. And there's great software out there like SIF.ai that will help you do a lot of stuff. A little shout out.
SIF.ai again.
So it'll help you do all of that. It's just like you're selling to a much larger panel of buyers and stakeholders. Whereas like a mid-market account, there may be, one head of a department, one director, one VP who really needs a solution, and it's, 50, 60 grand, and they have the budget. When you start doing like large enterprise sales and, things are costing $500,000, 7 figures, whatever it may look like, genuinely, you need to prospect into like multiple departments, different parts of the business. So it's just you have to go a little wider. And yeah, like being intentional is extremely important. And to kind of stand out, like one thing I've done at every single company is like I've really tried to experience the brand and then like firsthand and weave that into like my personal experiences into whatever I'm coming to them with.
Yeah, that reminds me of a meeting I got with the CMO of Sur La Table, and I had an experience with the brand. My mom bought me a macaroon making class, and I didn't want to go, but I ended up going and had the best time, and was on the T in Boston, the train, sharing macaroons with strangers. And I literally told that anecdote in the email. And I think that's what you're alluding to, of having experience with the brand, if possible. Is that more or less on track, or did you have other?
Yeah, that's it. I have a really funny story, actually.
I'd love to hear it.
We were trying to sell, everyone knows like Floor & Decor, the retailer. You can go there for like, go get new tiling for your house. They have a bunch of different locations. So it was like going to be a big opportunity if we got it. And we were trying to sell them like pre-employment background checks and drug screening, which is actually like those can actually be like 7-figure deals, like pretty easily. We weren't getting much traction. So what I did was I saw that they were hiring down in San Mateo, like an hour south of where I lived in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what, I'm going to go like apply for a job and do the whole onboarding and like hopefully get the job and see what their drug screening process was like. Now, like when I was down there and I was living in San Francisco, I'll openly say this, like I smoked pot at the time. I no longer do. I was like, the guy asked me, like, do you do this? Like, do you smoke pot? We're in San Francisco. It's perfectly legal.
Yeah.
But Floor & Decor does not allow this. And just to see like what he'd say, and like just being honest, I said, yes, I do. So I guess like I can't work here or what? And he was like, no, I actually know a way for you to cheat our drug tests. By doing like X, Y, and Z, I think you'd be a really good like fit for the job. Now, I walked out of there and I was like, holy crap. Like, I don't want to throw this guy under, the bus. And I absolutely like won't mention his name or, any specifics, but I bought that back and I started doing like outreach around like, how many people do you think are actually like cheating your drug test? And I like roughly spelled out how the guy like told me I could do it. And immediately, like their trust and safety officer, like said, I've actually like heard whispers around something like that. Like, tell me more. And I didn't sell that deal. It was like a strategic AE at the time, but we had like a whole audience thereafter to just learn about how our process was more secure.
So you had a direct firsthand experience with a process that broke down. That's pretty hilarious. And you were probably able to instill the fear of God in that. I think you said maybe a compliance safety officer. Correct me if I'm wrong. That is a great example of getting someone's attention and really having empathy for the problems in their world. I wanted to ask you about the role that mentorship played in your quick path from SDR to AE, and obviously you ended up going to manage enterprise AEs as well. But what role has mentorship played? And then we're going to talk about how do you build solid mentors in around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I might just still be making cold calls all day if I didn't have any good mentors. It's the most important piece. It's obviously a lot tougher now in a remote world where you can't go tap someone on the shoulder. But it's certainly possible. I've had people, try to build me up as a mentor. I'm still constantly like trying to build others as my own mentor, and mentors that I have benefited a lot from. I still keep in touch with them. There's a significant difference between like a friend and a mentor, I think. I mean, they can oftentimes be the same person. Um, but a mentor doesn't always have to be someone who's like a VP level or above person. It could be, an AE, it could be an SDR who's doing a little bit better and you think is going to go places. You just have to remember that, like, especially in like the remote world now, like just naturally, like people love talking about themselves. I've been on here for 37 minutes talking about myself. It's kind of ridiculous. I'm a salesperson, so I can run my if you come in and just ask people about like their story, and then like later on try and learn for yourself, and people like talking to you. People oftentimes don't want to hear about someone's seemingly boring like SaaS or tech career outside of tech. So when like someone young comes in with genuine curiosity, and just says, hey, can I like pick your brain for 30 minutes, like not on anything sales specific, but more about like how you got here, and what your story is, that's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, I love to ask people about their story, like where they're coming from. Of course, I like to know about their vision of where they're going. And they say the most fascinating people in a room or in a conversation are the ones that are truly fascinated in others. So we got a question from David Anthony, and I'll throw it up to you to see what you think. Any stories of deals involving partners or channels? I'm not sure in your sales career, have you worked with partners in your sales cycles? What's your experience with that?
I did a little bit of I spent a few months doing partnerships and channel work at Check, which is an embedded payroll infrastructure solution, a startup. But I only did that for about 4 months. I mean, like the stories with maybe some of the better takeaways are probably like net new, land side of the business sales. That's where I've spent most of my time and where I've seen the most success.
Yeah. And David, if you want to share more specifics around your question, maybe we both could tackle it together. But I'm on the partner side now, and partners need to come in, and when a cloud provider or a SaaS provider brings them in to pick up the baton and execute and deliver projects, not make the customer repeat themselves, but really make it a smooth white glove experience. And partners are great for helping like SaaS companies and cloud providers scale their support and go to market with actual hands-on keyboard experience. So I'm at a partner today, and if you have more specific questions, feel free to throw it in there. Partners can also help get things done with extra like resale margin if they're like a broker of a solution. I had my biggest deal at Google Cloud. We needed a little extra discounting, and we got a reseller to come in and so the bill would flow through them and do the deal through them, and they shaved a little discount to get it over the edge in a competitive scenario. So anyways, that's my go ahead.
I actually misinterpreted the question. I only like changed over to the comments thing now.
Yep.
I thought you meant partnerships in terms of like organizations mine would go work with and
okay, go ahead.
Those partnerships. Yeah, I mean at Checker, my first company, we integrated with a lot of applicant tracking systems. Those were always warmer introductions. They're already using the software. So yeah, I would start there. I would always spend time, learning what their teams are like, the conversations. It's mutually beneficial. So just taking the time to reach out saying, hey, my name's David. I'm an SDR. I'm an AE, wherever I am. Can we spend, 30 minutes up front, and can we set up like a bi-weekly or a monthly cadence where we check in with one another? I misinterpreted your question, but the majority of sales I did at Checker had some sort of applicant tracking system involved.
That's perfect. No, great distinction, clarification. And Guys, feel free to reach out to Ian, of course, and myself too on LinkedIn if you had one-off questions. And I'm volunteering that up, Ian, but I have a good feeling that you'd be willing to at least provide a little guidance, and just like you have to me and countless other people you've mentored. So yeah, so let's talk about your transition from SDR to AE. I just want to clarify, you went from SDR to mid-market AE and then mid-market AE to enterprise AE? Was that the transition? So, sorry, we talked about okay, this is what I want to hit on. What was a transition period like to go into a closing role, and how did you hit the ground running in the closing role?
Yeah, so for the transition, well, first I came in and our SDR director at the time, she now runs the SDR organization over at Carta. Her name is Anna Centrella.
Yeah.
She was great. She was a mentor of mine. I still keep in touch with her. They had outlined that, this is at a minimum 12-month program here. And I came in and, not every director, not every sales leader is going to respond to this well. So you really have to just see if it's, the right company, the right people, and that you're not getting too ahead of yourself. But after I proved that I was, somewhat competent at my job, I just said, okay, so, you've outlined that my goal to move up is I have to hit quota for 100% for 4 quarters in a row. I said, what if I, do 200% for 2 quarters in a row, same sort of accomplishments, same sort of meetings, opportunities, just in half the amount of time, then can we have a conversation? And I said, at the end of the 6 months, if I don't do it, I'll shut up and I'll never bring the topic up again until you think I'm ready. So kind of putting the risk on myself.
Yeah.
And she responded really well to that. And it was, an even bigger motivator for me to figure it out quickly, because I didn't want to, sit there and bite my tongue for the remaining 6 months until she thought I was ready to have that conversation again.
So you created some external pressure and necessity, which I think is really smart. And I did that myself a few times in my career, especially when I transitioned from Oracle to Google. And I kind of proclaimed, it wasn't necessarily to my own teammates when I was at Oracle, but to my family, I was going to work at Google. And I felt like by doing that, it's not the same as your scenario, but it had to happen.
Yeah.
Because there's this external pressure. So that's a good idea for folks to try out, is to, suggest, especially if you're in a situation where I talk to a guy, it's like, oh, they're saying we can't get promoted to SDR for 2 years now. I'm like, oh my gosh, that sucks. Maybe he could create that proposition. If I over deliver, how about we take a look and at promoting me sooner? And if not, I love that you said that I will shut up about it. So great tidbit. How about the transition into leadership? What was that like? What's it like managing teams? And because that's a hop that some people get to, some don't, but a lot of people are curious about.
Yeah. So fortunately, again, I had great mentors kind of coaching me along the way. My first leadership role, I was in a full-time leader. I was the 4th go-to-market hire at a check, and you had to wear a lot of hats. So I had, a quota, an individual any other individual contributor that I carried, but I was also leading our direct sales motion. So it kind of helped in that way, in that it was more of a hybrid role. And then my first time being a full-time, manager or leader was at Upwork, where I had to build out a team from scratch. I didn't inherit any AEs, and I hired and managed 7 enterprise account executives. And it was tough. It's just a lot more listening and trying to understand where people come from. I was very competitive, so I had to unlearn a lot of the bad habits I had around when I first started off as an SDR. I was a nice guy, but probably a little difficult to be around at times, because I was fixated on ringing a bell or getting my hand raised, being number 1, number 2, so I could move up. And then you have to kind of take a step back, and one example of that was when I first came in and started managing our like weekly team meetings, which were an hour long, would go something like, I'd come in with a list of like agenda items, like company things, deal things that I wanted to talk through with the team. Maybe it's like quick forecasting. And I would talk for the first 30 minutes, and then I would open it up to conversation for the remaining 30. And sometimes they wouldn't even go that long. A team would speak for 10 minutes and say, do you want your time back? And you can tell everyone's like, I want to get the hell off of here.
Yep.
And actually like read a book. I was reading like a book by like Nelson Mandela, and he said like he conducted every single meeting that ever like went anywhere where the needle was moved by like walking in and basically not saying a thing for the first half of the meeting, however long it was. So I would come in and say like, hey guys, like I don't care if we just have like a normal conversation, like it could be work related, sometimes not, but like let's keep it on topic. And then just sit back and I would respond if questions were asked. I wouldn't just like ignore everyone. But in doing so, I became the manager that I responded better to in the past. And I could learn a lot more about where everyone was actually coming from and how they were feeling versus like me coming in and dictating and mandating like, this is how it's going to go. And I'm the boss and like, you better listen and follow through. It just like created a much like closer knit environment in a world where we had a guy in Boston, one guy in California, one in Texas, a couple in Chicago. So that was probably like one of the more meaningful adjustments I had to make in managing a team is listening, being less competitive, and trying to understand everyone's perspective and like where they're coming from and why they make certain decisions.
So creating the space for people on your team to feel heard and validated. It reminds me of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the habits is seek first to understand. So that's cool that you learned that and had to kind of rewire yourself to show up in the managerial role versus the individual contributor role. As people think through whether they want to be that top individual contributor, enterprise seller, making deep 6 figures, maybe $1 million a year, because some people do that, or a manager that is leading teams, how would you advise someone to think through determining which type of role is a better path for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's a tough one. It's like being a manager, being in leadership, you get a far more holistic view about how an organization runs. I was dealing with our cross-functional teams and leaders a lot more than I had in the past. So in trying to like better understand business, and which will in turn, make you a better seller as you sell to different parts of different organizations, there's a big benefit there. At the same time, like leading a team, like there's a lot more noise. You can't just focus on your book of business. You can't just come in and do what you do, and you have to deal with people's life situations, a lot of emotions, people not getting along with each other, people, creating toxic environments, like gossiping, whatever it may be. All of those things that aren't really in the job description, but build you as a person. At the same time, like I've never made more money than when I was like a top performing AE. So there's a benefit there.
Yeah, that's a key thing is you can make more money as an individual contributor. And there's just a lot more responsibility as a manager or leader. As before, if there's drama going on or issues with other teammates, you can just put your head in the sand and deliver and be a lone wolf. But as a manager, you are responsible to try and solve that. And so it's like your thing, your crap that you got to clean up. So, and don't you have to do a lot more with data and reporting as a manager, and then also like potentially fire people?
Yeah.
So those are some other tough aspects, right?
Yeah. When you have to transition people out of a business, there's nothing more unenjoyable that I've ever had to do in my career. Especially because like a lot of the time, like sometimes like you don't even have like the discretion if you think like they have potential. Sometimes like a VP or head of sales doesn't think they can make the adjustments, but you do, and it's outside of your control, and it's not a fight you can win. So that there are those those setbacks for sure. But at the same time, like what is really cool is that you're a part of so many different deals. Like I had 7 reps on my team. Every one of them had like a handful of, interesting deals moving at once. So I could learn a lot more about like different use cases and become more dangerous there, because I wasn't just focused on, those that are tied to myself directly.
So as a manager, would you still be closing deals though tactically you'd be brought in for like big strategic deals?
Yeah. And again, we had some reps who were having a really hard time. Some would get burnt out. Some, just couldn't really, build the right relationship with the prospect. So there were a couple of deals that I had to close myself. Now, that's probably not the best, most scalable way to lead. And like a good manager, if they catch themselves doing that too often, should probably really critically think about how they can change that as quickly as possible. But yeah, how to do that.
Let's finish up by talking about your MMA career and how you got into MMA. That's so cool. And, some of the lessons you learned, and then talking about just living fully in life. And if a few sales concepts pop up too, that's great. But how did you get into MMA?
Yeah, I came back here from South Africa halfway through high school. I coincidentally went to the #1 wrestling program in the country, picked it up. It was a boarding school, like everyone was recruited. My roommate was like a wrestler from North Dakota, like true farm boy. That really just turned me on to it. I picked it up really quickly. That's where I figured out the effort and hours piece to basically everything to close that gap. I went on to wrestle for the Big Ten program at Michigan State. But while I was there, I was not loving it. I showed up overweight. I was, 18 years old. I shot up a few inches. I was supposed to wrestle at 133 pounds. I was about 160 when I showed up to campus. I ended up making that weight, which is miserable in that kind of weather. But I wasn't performing super well at that weight. And we had a, all-American type guy at the weight I wanted to go. And it was looking like I had a red shirt a year. And I just said, wow, I'm like freezing my butt up here. I'm doing this 6 hours a day. Not much else, not having a true college experience. I don't know if I want to do this forever. And I like, in some ways you can say I quit, but instead, like what I found was like, because Division I, like college wrestlers don't have, the MLB, the NHL, the NBA to go to. The closest thing is the UFC. So like older guys on the team were taking, amateur and pro fights on weekends and in the off seasons in like Detroit, Chicago. And I had a couple buddies who are now in the UFC who I wrestled with, who literally just dragged me out there and started taking like some fights on short notice secretly, because you're not allowed to fight while you're in the NCAA. And I just got hooked. So I said, wow, like maybe I should go back to South Africa where I can be warm, happy, fight at the weight I want, and learn the other disciplines like Muay Thai, boxing, jiu-jitsu, and become a holistic, like well-rounded fighter where, I feel like I can be like one of the best. And I was ranked, 5th on the African continent at 155 pounds when I stopped fighting, which was now ages ago. But I just realized the opportunity there. And, through just doing that and being an athlete, like most of my life, some of the things that translate are, when I do have to work a 12, 14-hour day, whatever it may look like, at least I can drink water. At least I'm not hungry. There are benefits to that. Dehydration's the worst, but also just being like healthy in general. If you become a workhorse and you're just working 12 hours a day and you're not working out, or you're not sweating, like you don't have to be a world-class athlete. You just have to sweat like every single day for a minimum of 30 minutes. Yeah. You will inherently be better at your job. You'll be more pleasant to be around. Prospects will see it. You'll light up a little bit more.
Yeah.
So those are the key takeaways. Just be a healthy person.
Yeah, that's really good advice, that when you take care of your health and work out, it carries over into how you show up. Like I actually, was just working out and did an ice bath. This, as you know, And it just feels good, man. It carries over this conversation. I feel like I can be more present with you.
You're glowing.
And yeah, I'm glowing. And it's so cool that you had something in you to be a fighter. Like, and I'm just curious, like, what was it about fighting that you loved? Because that's like, to me, like like, you know, like throwing punches is something like, well, were you throwing punches?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, what, you know, what was it about fighting that you loved?
I mean, I grew up playing team sports my whole life and like learned a lot about that. I mean, a lot from that I use today. But I would like constantly be pissed off when we lost. And I found there was like a lot of finger pointing, right? Like you let this goal in, you know, you drop this pass, you know, when you lose a fight, like at the end of the day, all you can really do is go home and look in the mirror and say like, I screwed up. I didn't work hard enough. Like I cut this corner or whatever. I didn't cut weight the right way, whatever it is, it's on you. And that's what I like the most about being an individual contributor. Yes, I have cross-functional partners. Yes, it's definitely a team sport. Sales is a team sport. Business is a team sport. But I like the self-accountability and, you know, punching, kicking, choking people, which is just a byproduct of that.
Yeah, self-accountability. That is such a foundational aspect of high performance and living a full life. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on this quote from Mike Tyson that you might have heard. Everyone's got a plan until they're punched in the face. Like, how do you handle when you get punched in the face? What's that like? And how do you respond?
I mean, if you're training the right way and like you should probably you learn a lot about yourself pretty quickly, right? It actually doesn't hurt as much as you think. Like in the fight, you feel a lot worse like in the day and the weeks after. You usually have like good amount of adrenaline going. There's a couple thousand people, you know, screaming and stuff. You signed up for that, you know it's coming.
Yeah.
So you just kind of suck it up and deal with it. Fortunately, like I never got knocked out. I never got submitted. I never lost like an MMA fight. I lost a bunch of wrestling matches.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something you have to deal with, and it kind of ties into just like being audible ready when you hop onto, you know, a sales call. Like, you know, they might want the call to go a totally different way than you had planned, and you kind of just have to be ready to roll with it, just like getting punched in the face, right?
Yeah, and it's like if you can take a punch to the face, you could take a rejection on a cold call.
Yeah.
You know, so David
Anthony, they're saying much worse things to you, and you know, press conferences or, you know, leading up to it. Like people are a lot more harsh in the MMA world than they are in tech sales. So someone telling you to F off on a cold call it's long.
I mean, if we could just remind ourselves of that, guys, when next time you go to pick up the phone, at least you're not getting punched in the face. And a manager of mine at Google told a story about being chased by a rabid dog while doing door-to-door sales or like having a gun pointed at him. So that's also, you know, a similar thing. Like a cold call isn't as bad as that. But David Anthony said, tech sales and MMA are my two favorite things. I'll be in Vegas for UFC 290. Who are your picks for this weekend's fight?
Yeah, that's a good question. I probably have Volkanovski. One, I have Bo Nickel for sure, D1 college wrestler. Who is fighting at? Normally, I know this off the top of my head. Those are the two that stand out the most. But I know it's a stacked card.
Yeah, well, I didn't even realize there was a fight going on, but I'll tell you, it's so fun when I like watch the big ones like Conor McGregor and like Floyd Mayweather, and then I guess Logan Paul and them. That's something, you know, these guys doing the fight and Jake Paul, and they're actually not half bad, are they? Like,
they've, you know, I've kind of been rooting. I was rooting for them to get knocked out a few times when they were fighting these like UFC champs like Tyrone Woodley.
Yeah.
Floyd Mayweather. They've shut me up a few times. They're good boxers.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if they're like good pro boxers, if they were fighting at their true weight and fighting like actual boxers and not like retired wrestlers and stuff. Or like Floyd Mayweather is like 145 pounds while Logan's like 220 probably. But they're good boxers, and you know, they could beat me up at boxing.
Yeah, I'm just picturing myself in there. I'd get knocked out. But it's a funny thought to think of. So Operations Tech Takeover, I don't know your first name, but said much respect to Ian, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu all day. I'm not sure if Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, if that's a typo or if that's a thing.
It's like one of the largest, like it's like the family that really bought jiu-jitsu to like a widespread scale. I trained with like Half Gracie and a bunch of like the Gracie family members when I lived in San Francisco. Like they franchised it. They make like tens of millions of dollars. There's a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in basically almost any country you go to. And there are a few here in Austin too. Yeah, it's just like a family that perfected the craft and grew it extremely well.
Wow. We've definitely got some MMA and jiu-jitsu fans and fighter fans and Ian fans. You've been great, man. Thank you for sharing your time. We're on the hour mark. I said it might be 30 minutes to an hour, but I knew this would go the distance today. I just wanted to finish up before some calls to action on lofting up this grandiose question of what does it really look like to live a good life to you? Like, what are some of the keys beyond the bounds of tech sales, but just more broadly speaking?
I didn't know you were directing that at me. I thought it was just like food for thought for the next one. What are
some of your keys to, and it's different for everyone, to living a full life? Because this channel is about success in tech sales and also living fully, and tech sales being a vehicle to, financial freedom and all these things that you've experienced. So just kind of ending on a high note of like maybe some life advice and things that have resonated for you in terms of living fully.
Yeah, I would just say like putting it all into perspective. It's going to be different for everyone else. Like for me, the things that make me feel extremely fulfilled are, I said like being healthy. I have far more balance in my life than I did when I was an SDR. So it is a means to an end, even though sure I'll work like a 14-hour day, maybe like once a week or whatever it may be. But finding a little more balance there. I mean, I have a great wife. I have 2 dogs, awesome friend group. So yeah, I mean, it's great. Like now I have, enough cash in my bank account because like I've, put in a lot of those hours, and I mean, not enough to like retire, but to the point where I'm not like stressing about, putting food on the table, like paying rent and things like that. So it's paid off, and that's allowed me to spend more time like figuring out, who do I want to be when I'm 50? It's probably like a good husband, good father. And still the guy, like there was a guy at Half Gracie's in San Francisco, funny enough, we called him Old Man Mike. He was like 65, D1 wrestler, black belt, been doing jiu-jitsu like 40 years, showed up to the gym every day. Everyone went soft on it, like, because he's 65. But he was a killer, and he showed up there and he was sweating every day. And, he caught me in like a few weird chokes sometimes because most of the time, like, we'd let him get into those positions, but still humbling. And like, when I think about like, who do I want to be? I don't know what he was like outside of the gym, but I want to be like that badass 65-year-old guy who's like still showing up every single day. And just like not trying to be the best at that, but like perfecting my craft. That's really important to me. And that kind of like ties into other things that I do outside of work too.
So family and friends, maybe some doggos, and I definitely relate to the dog front. Talk about the ultimate emotional support and best friend, and still fighting at 65, giving life all you got. I went to church the other day, a week ago in Florida, and the message was live like you're dying. And one of the aspects of that was enjoying the people you're with, enjoying your work, and being fully spent up. And that's what it sounds like you're doing, man, and that you've been doing. And I commend you for that. So guys, thank you for your time and attention. We got 7 people live. We're up to as high as 11 or 12. Thank you to the people who will show up in the future for your time and attention as this floats out into the YouTube sea. Make sure to connect with Ian Mindham on LinkedIn. I put his LinkedIn profile in the description of this video. Connect with me. Mentorship is important, and Ian's the type of guy who's willing to help out. And Ian, any other final calls to action on your end?
No, I just say like the last thing I left off about like being a whole person is just helping other people out, whether that's someone who's like outside of work who has like sacrificed or done something to you and is not in a great situation and you can help them, or if it's like, you know, a BDR who you can see is hungry and, you know, want to help them get into a closing role and have a little more financial freedom. That's the last piece. But yeah, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you for everyone on here. Sorry I didn't read all the comments as they were coming through.
Yeah, great engagement, man.
I'm always happy to chat.
What a fun conversation. And you remind me of one final quote from Zig Ziglar. It's like, how do you get everything you want in life? Help more people get what they want out of life. And you're doing that. You're sharing advice that people can apply on the court, in the tech sales game, and in life to help them produce better results. So to your success in tech sales and in life, happy selling and happy living, everyone. And looking forward to seeing you in the next one.